we're going to learn for the Menucha of Surname Danger and Surname Montefiore. I want to go back to page 2. We're continuing unit 44. I want to go to, yes, 44. I want to go back to the Gemara at page 2 and make a specific point about the Gemara to open up the Shittot and the Rishonim. I think we got as far as the Rambam last time, right? Yes, I remember mentioning the Rambam. I don't think we went very deeply into him yet, right? Is that correct? Okay, good. So the Gemara ends up, the Gemara at the bottom of page 2 ends up, middle bottom of page 2, ends up saying that when you have an Eli, you have an Eli that happens to be a pestle of sorts, kind of thing you can slice meat on somehow. You're not allowed to carry it on Yantiv. The question is, why not? Initially, they want to say maybe it's Rabbi Nechemiah's opinion, but they change their mind and say, oh, wait. And let's just read that line in the Gemara. Kevan de Shamash, 2 lines from the bottom. At the end of the line, Kevan de Shama leha da'amar of China bal Shalmi mishmei derav. Hakol modim besichi zayri umzore de Kevan de kapi dalai miyachadu makom halinam miyachadu makom. So he's saying, once he remembered, or once he heard that there's this idea regarding Sichei Zalim Zoe, which is painter's tools, that since you are makbid on them, they have a designated space. Haninami, these two have a designated space. You don't have this?
No. It's on page 1.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, it is on page 1. I apologize. Sorry. My computer was just open partly to the next page.
Page 1,
Bottom of page 1. I'm sorry.
44.
All right. 44, my page 1. In the English, at the bottom of page, wait. The Gemara Kufkafka, it's right over there. Yeah, that one, right over there. That Gemara right over there. Sorry. I'm sorry, my computer was still on the next page. On page 1, so I'll read it again. Right, so the answer he wants to give is that since once he heard that all agree that you're not allowed to carry these painter's tools, since you are makbid on them, they have a designated place. These two have a designated place. Now, Tosfot learned from this that designating a certain space is the definitive parameter for Muktze and Chesron case. What the next Gemara we saw says about a menorah that doesn't have that also has a designated place. Tosfot said that's not designation. We're not real designation. So it has to be proper and full designation, and then it will be Muktze and Chesron case. If it's not a properly designated space, then it won't. That's how Tosfot learned the relationship between the Gemara here and the Gemara there. But I have a question on Tosfot. Now, that's what we learned last time. We learned last time again, just briefly. Tosfot say that the space designation is what defines case. The Pnei Yoshua says that setting it in a certain space means that you're makbid on a klisha machtole isur. Fundamentally, klisha machtole isur, you're only allowed to carry for mutter uses, but you object to using them for anything else. Right? If I have my special shchita knife, I can chop salad with it, but you better not chop salad with my shchita knife. Right? So since I have that kpeda, mimele, the ability to use the klisha machtole isur for anything else becomes usher, and that's the Muktze Chesron case. That's the Pnei Yoshua. But I'm going to go back to the Tosfot. Tosfot learns from here that space designation is the most important parameter. It's discussed here in Kuf Kaf Bet. It's discussed again in Daf Mem. That's the discussion. Correct. Now, often those things would go together. Why am I so makbid? Right.
You have a hammer.
That's right.
You hang it up in a certain place.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
5 shekel hammer.
Right. Elamai, why am I so makbid on my hammer? Because I know that when I need a hammer, I want to know where my hammer is, or I'll lose it. Right. I want to know I spent 20 shekels on this hammer, but when I need it, I don't want to start looking through the whole house. I want to know exactly where it is. I do not let any of my kids touch it. I put it in a very specific place. No one can move it from here because when I want it, right, I have that screwdriver that I want to know that it's there when I need it. It's a 15 shekel screwdriver, but I'm going to put a very specific place. that'd be Muktze Mechamat Chesron case. Yes. So, because I'm makpid not to move it, it does make sense logically. It makes sense to say something that you're makpid not to move really is Muktze. Okay. Why are you objecting? Because it's called Muktze Mechamat Chesron Kis. So where's the monetary value here, right? The name doesn't really fit the description all that much. Like we could assume some kind of relationship between the two, but it's not cohesive enough. It's not evident enough, right? It's not that one leads to the other logically necessarily, right? But I have a different question on Tosfot, which is this. Just a sec, sorry. I have a different question on Tosfot, like this. Why does the Gemara need to introduce the Sichei Zarim Zorei? I mean, it's fun to say Sichei Zarim Zorei, but why does the Gemara have to say it? Exactly. Why does the Gemara have to introduce this? If the relevant parameter is space designation, if that's the relevant criteria, right? Space designation. So the Gemara should just say, oh, so you should Gemara should have said, and this is actually Me'achad Lu Makom. So why is it only after he heard that Sichei Zarim Zorei Me'achad Lu Makom and Kali Me'achad Lu Makom? So what?
But the point we care about space designation is because it's basically operates as a sense to the care with which we replace and believe in this particular object. So we're saying though that even if there's an object that would normally be placed with care, the fact that we don't put it away with care means that it's not for us. I mean, is it personal to? So
I think I at least, I mean, you posed one question, but I heard two other things in what you said, right? Your question was, does this mean that that's subjective, right? Every person has his right. I said, I have my screwdriver. I want to know where it is when things go wrong, right? It's not very expensive, but that's irrelevant, right? But that's only me, right? Other people might say, screw, I don't care, screw, but here, but there, who cares? Whatever, I know what area it's in, and also whatever, I have a whole bunch of screwdrivers, who cares, right? So is this individual, right? For every person? According to Tosfot, it would sound like it, right? It would sound like it's subjective. But I think that you also, in what you said, you added another aspect here, which is Tosfot is looking only at the Yichud Makom, but you can read the Gemara in a different way. If you're looking only at Yichud Makom, you don't need this. Just say Yichud Makom. If we know it's irrelevant, why? If we already shouldn't be.
I understand why questions can say, because that's the whole point. He learned. He was trying to figure out what's the parameter, and
right.
He heard from that's the parameter. Yichud Makom. So he said, "Oh, okay. Well, now that I understand, that's a good explanation for the situation too."
So you're saying before that they had no idea what Muktze Mechamat Chesron Kis is, because I will remind you, the sugya is not discussing Muktze Mechamat Chesron Kis, it's discussing Kedusha Avtolei Yisur. He only said, "Oh, wait, you know what? This can actually be Muktze Mechamat Chesron Kis. It's not a Kedusha Avtolei Yisur, or at least not merely a Kedusha Avtolei Yisur. It's actually Muktze Mechamat Chesron Kis, because Muktze Me'achad Lu Makom." It says, since I remembered, oh yeah, I once heard that Sichei Zarim Zorei Me'achad Lu Makom. You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying that. There might be other ways to answer this. I mean, I'm going to propose two other ways of reading the Gemara. That's my goal here. So one way is the way I understand the Rambam. I think the Rambam reads the sugya exactly for that reason. The Rambam reads the sugya exact opposite. And this is Dr. Paz is going to like this. What is a Muktze Mechamat Chesron Kis? Suddenly you're Muktze Mechamat Chesron Kis. That's Muktze Mechamat Chesron Kis. So what's the Gemara saying? The Gemara is saying, there's a chidush, that there are other things that you wouldn't intuitively say is Muktze Mechamat Chesron Kis. But they also fit into that category because they have a designated space. Because you designated space for them. And that's what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is saying, how do I know that you're Muktze something Mechamat Chesron Kis? So for example, if I have wares in my store, right? I have goods that I want to sell, right? So I don't want them harmed. I don't want them used. I'm not going to use them once because I want to be able to sell them later, right? If I have a farm store, in my other share, I actually have a guy who owns his farm store, and I gave this example. He said, "No, that's not true." But I have a farm store, and I need to look something up. I don't have my part to shoot because it's Shabbos. I'm not going to go to my farm store and look up into the sefer and then put it back on the shelf, right? He says, everyone is opening farm all the time, so I might do that theoretically. But right, you want so that's your Muktze. You set them aside. Mechamat Chesron case, because you're concerned that they might get ruined, they might lose value. Exactly. Your
Like a
Muktze,
baseball card, you wouldn't take it and.
right? Do anything with it really? No,
Right,
right?
just-
Because it has to
just
stay
the-
in mint condition. Exactly. That's the whole goal of the baseball card is to. Now, does the baseball card have a very specific place? Maybe, but maybe not. But still, you're still makbid not to do anything else with it. Not because it's worth $3, but it's not the most expensive thing you have in the house. But what you do with it is keep it safe, keep it in condition. That's what you do, right? Yeah, fair. That's a good example, right? And what the Rambam says. So what is the Gemara saying? The Gemara is saying. Then he realized that space designation can also indicate Haktzah Mechamat Chesron case, and therefore we can say the same for the pesel. That's the idea.
So then the candelabra that they use was garbage?
Why you say garbage?
Not garbage,
It's
but
not
it wasn't-
garbage.
it didn't have much value.
No, it could also be expensive. Just because something is expensive doesn't necessarily mean that you're super makbid on it. Here, how much does this cost?
I don't know, $800.
Whatever. I'm saying it's not cheap, right?
Give it 20 shekel.
Thanks. Right. So we walk around with it, we let it fall. We don't throw it, but we're not super makbid on being a specific place. We're not right. Just because it's expensive doesn't necessarily mean that we're.
You can leave it anyway.
No, but that doesn't matter. The Rambam saying is that's an extra parameter by which we learn.
What?
The Rambam saying the Rambam.
The monetary value.
No, the Rambam said the
Yeah,
Rambam saying
yeah.
this. Something you are makbid. We're going to see the lashon in the Rambam in a moment. But before we go into the details of the Rambam, we should read the Rambam. But before I do that, I just want to read the Gemara the way I understand the Rambam reads the Gemara. The Rambam says, we knew what Muktze Chesron case is. It's something you're Muktze because you're concerned about the value being diminished. Is that the word?
Devalue.
Devalue, yeah, it's not completely whatever.
Okay.
Those sound too extreme to me. We understand each other. Yeah. We're concerned about losing value when in improper use, right?
It's monetary.
Yes. Chesron case is always monetary. That's the definition.
Well,
Now,
just keep the knife.
Yeah,
You're worried about losing value, just about losing the quality that makes it worthwhile to you.
doesn't that?
Tomato.
I say that's why I'm asking about monetary. Okay, but
So I want to raise a, I
You have
want to
to
raise
make
a,
a lot of effort to sharpen it up again. So
wait, but hold on. Before the example, just one sec. All I want to say about this is that my understanding of the way the Rambam reads the Gemara is, the Rambam says, I knew what Muktze Chesron case is. We haven't read the Rambam yet, so let's read the Rambam before we go into other examples. But the Rambam says, we know what Muktze Chesron case is intuitively. We understand it. We read in Gemara and Kuf Nun Zayin. We understand. The Gemara says, there's another way of indicating that something in Muktze Chesron case, and that is Haktzat Makom, Yichud Makom.
It's not the only.
It's not the only right. Afuch. It's the chidush. That's why I need this Rav China Bar Shalmi Yeshmei Rav. Right. I need another maimer to teach me that that's also a criteria that affects the din.
Does it have to be
And that's
no?
That's a good question. Let me address that soon. So that's a fair question. But I'm just saying, the Rambam says, what is Muktze Chesron case is Muktze Chesron case. So now there's a chidush that that's something you're meyached makom, something you're meyached makom is also Muktze Chesron case. That's a chidush that Rav China Bar Shalmi taught us, and that's why you need him. But that means that the primary definition is not this. This is an additional one.
Mhm.
So we'll read that in the Rambam in a moment. But first, let's hear of Baruch, who's been hand up for a very long time. Both hands, with the
So
electronic one and the physical
there
one.
are three points to this. One is it's a tool.
Okay.
The other is that you worry about its cost, there's
Mhm,
Chesron
mhm,
keys. And the third is, it has a designated place,
Yes.
okay? And it could be that you have two out of those three. But I want to play this out. What if I have a diamond, a very expensive diamond necklace? So
Okay.
it's not a tool,
Right.
but I keep it in a special place.
Mhm.
And I only take it out from time to time. And clearly, if something happens to it, there's Chesron keys.
Correct.
So is the fact that it's not a kli changes that?
So what we know so far, right? So let's work this out, right? Rav Baruch's example. We have Tosfot who say that Tosfot don't seem to care about the Kli Shemachol Isur aspect, right? Only about the designated space, right? Designated place. And then that would be correct, right? You keep it in your safe, right? It's a diamond necklace. You keep it in your safe, and you only take it out for special occasions, and you put it right back. You're not going to leave it by the kitchen sink, right? So in the Chinami, right? According to Tosfot.
Makom thing about keeping it in a place because you don't use it on Shabbat. I mean, you're keeping it in a place away because you don't want it,
That's the Pnei Shua.
as opposed to, diamond necklace even wear on Shabbat. There's no reason to keep it in special place because you're careful about it.
So that's a good question. In other words, this does raise a bit of a problem in Tosfot. It means that you can't wear the diamond necklace on Shabbos.
It'd be so-
Maybe unless you actively say you're going to.
And what-
Right.
what
You'd
is
have
it-
to do something like that. Wait, hold on. Then we have the Pnei Shua would say correct, right? The Pnei Shua would make Glenn's point and say, as long as it's not a Kli Shemachol Isur, of course you can carry it on Shabbos, right? Not that only Kli Shemachol Isur are Muktze, but it's a Kli. You can use it on Shabbos. You're very makbid, but so what? Let's read the Lashon in the Rambam.
The other thing is, if it's the same diamond necklace, but they're not two diamonds, they're just pieces of glass, but they've got a very high sentimental value. For that reason, you put it into a special place because you don't want your daughter to come along and put it on. Or,
And take it again.
Whatever it is, okay, well, yeah, to do it for Purim. Okay, there's a sentimental value. It hasn't got a monetary value, it's got a sentimental value.
Right. So I think we have to end up with subjective aspects to this. B'chol mikra, right? I was thinking, like, what's the most unique tool I have? So a friend of mine made me, after my washing machine once got stuck, I had to open the drain. I opened the drain at the bottom of the washing machine. Right? A shricha. It got stuck and it was really hard to open. It's very easy to do it when nothing is stuck. When something is stuck there, it was very hard to do. And he made me a special tool. It's like this arm that has a specific, that's open in a very specific way, in such a way that exactly latches onto that, and then you just turn it. It makes it very easy. Now, it doesn't really cost anything. He used it he took it out of a wood pile that was like going to garbage. He just has the machinery to make the exact so I keep it in a very specific place, Behemet, because it's irreplaceable. I don't think you can sell it. I'm whatever. But right, it didn't cost me anything. He gave me as a present when I asked him for help. And I don't think you can sell it, but it's the most unique tool I have, right? Because no one else has it. Even when I brought a plumber, he used this other thing that wasn't as good. Right. So it wasn't a plumber, it was an electric appliance guy. Right. So there too. How expensive this? So in the Chinam, you have to end up with, right? Let's see the Rambam, bottom of page 4, I think, right? Kol kli shemakpid alav shema yifchetu damav. Right? Makpid, that's where the Muktze aspect comes in the English. In the Hebrew, yes. כל כלי שמקפיד עליו שמא יפחתו דמיו, כגון כלים המוקצים לסחורה, וכלים העיקריים ביותר שמקפיד עליהם שמא ייפסדו, אסור לטלטלן בשבת. וזהו נקרא מוקצה מחמת חסרון כיס, right? מקפיד, יפחתו דמיו, that's מוקצה, חסרון כיס. Now, what are the examples? very, very expensive, right? Kilim ikarim biotel, right? Very expensive kilim. And kilim muktzim lischora is the example I said before about the bookstore, right?
Mhm.
If you have goods in your store, you don't want to use them, right? If you have some guests over on Shabbos, and you say, "Oh, I need a bunch of forks." Oh, it's very lucky because I happen to have, right? My store happens to sell utensils, so I'm going to go in and take a bunch of forks and then just put them back, right? No, I won't. I'll go borrow from the neighbor. The neighbor will say, "But you own a store." I'm like, "Right, but I'm not going to start opening packages on Shabbos. Not on Shabbos. I'm not going to start opening the packages of my utensils from my store." Also, I realize I do need more, but right, it's not something you do. So even that, why? Because that's the haktsa'ah. Because you don't. Why? Because once you use it once, you can't sell it anymore, so it loses all value, right? They say when you buy a car, right? Once you drive it out of the lot, it decreases by what 40% or something, right? Whatever. I mean, it's like it's no longer a first-hand car. From now on, you're selling it. The next sale will be second-hand, even if you did the next day, right? Or whatever. It loses, right? Decreases in value significantly. Now, כגון מסר גדול, יתד של מחרשה, סכין של טבחים, חרב של אושקפים, וחצין החרשין, וכהונה של בשמים, וכיוצא בהם. קיצור, the Rambam, what was I saying? All these things, the last examples really are Kelim Shachtan Leisur, but that doesn't seem to be the main point in the Rambam, right?
The main point in the Rambam is the value.
Right. Main point is things I'm concerned about using because they might lose value. And then that's the central definition. Now the Gemara says there's another chidush, the things that you're makbid not to move.
So where does he bring the Yichud Makom?
No, it's funny. Only as I was talking, I said, "Wait, how did I not look at the Rambam that talks about Yichud Makom?" Or that'd be the first thing. You should look for to see what he does with that.
In your thesis, we'd want to see that like 2 halachot later. He's like, "V'chem kelim shem yached makom."
The next line, remember what section, Kol Kli Shel Yom Hatzil Shimush, just Yipadu, Muktzze Mechamat Kismekis. Remember, I know Mabchim Ve'Kli Shenachto Ve'isu, Ve'Tir, V'chein Adisha She'ati Yir Makom Yivukad, and no.
Namuskera.
Muskin. Okay. So now it's exactly the same.
Yeah, it doesn't. Right? He doesn't mention it. He doesn't mention it, which yes is interesting, right?
Maybe that just means they didn't pass them.
Right. He doesn't.
Yeah, it's coming back to
the Rambam. So right. So the Bemet, there's a question of why did the Rambam not mention these other Gemaras that are referring to, that do refer to the designation. Now it may be so I'm thinking of one or two options. One option is to say, what I'm more noted to say is, we saw the Gemara in Daf Mem Hey. We read 2 ways of reading the Gemara in Daf Mem Hey. Let's jump over to that for a moment. I want to suggest 2 ways of reading the Gemara in Daf Mem Hey. The Gemara in Daf Mem Hey, I'll remind you, it's on page 2 of the English pages. The Gemara in Daf Mem Hey starts from the candelabra, right? The menorah. Just call it menorah. I feel like it's Hanukkah again. It's just Purim last week. So. Page 2, yeah. So why can you page 2 in the Ivrit version as well? I think so. The menorah, Daf Mem Hey. Page 3. Okay. Well, Daf Mem Hey. It's on page 3 of the Hebrew pages. Page 2 of the English pages. The Gemara here discusses the menorah and why can't you carry it, and ends up saying you can't carry it because it might fall apart, and then you're gonna have to put it together again, and then you have some kind of bona business going on there. So that's why you can't carry the menorah. But the Gemara compares it to, but Abaye says, Rabbi and Rav Yosef propose that maybe it has to do with space designation, and Abaye says space designation. What's that? One way of reading Abaye, right? He says, when you put a bed together on Shabbos, you're allowed to move the bed even though the beds have a designated space. So what are you talking about, right? Now, we read this Gemara in two ways, and I'll go through the three ways of reading this Gemara. The Pnei Yeshua's way is all these examples, all these objects are examples of things that are not Kli Shemachtorei Isur, and therefore Rabbi and Rav Yosef say, oh, maybe this whole idea of space designation applies also to things that are not Kli Shemachtorei Isur. Rabbi says, nah, that's ridiculous. You have beds in your house, you're allowed to move them around, even though they have designated spaces. Of course, that's to be Kli Shemachtorei Isur. So that's the way Pnei Yeshua reads it.
Mhm.
Tosfot say, and here I want to read the first Gemara in a different way. Tosfot say we see that the candelabra and the bed, the criteria, to what extent do you not move them? Right. What's the bar of not moving? Right. How much do you not move them? Tosfot say we see the candelabra and the bed don't quite reach that level.
Mhm.
And then I think you can also read the first Gemara, the Chesron Zoreh. You say, oh, Chesron Zoreh, their space is designated enough, and therefore the Eli is also a space that's designated enough. Meaning, it's all the only the only axis, I guess, but the only right. The only what the axis, yeah, the only relevant question what parameter, but again on a scale.
Okay.
Right, that's a parameter on the scale. That's called axis, but whatever. Right, the only parameter is, does it have kviyut makom? Does it have the space designated? And you say, well, the bed and the candelabra are that designated, and the Eli is that designated. So the Eli is asur and the bed and candelabra are mutar, but the Eli is a bit beyond the. Chesron Zoreh. Chesron Zoreh is that much. Says the Eli is that much. Oh, Chesron Zoreh is even less. Okay, so. In other words, the reason you introduce the Chesron Zoreh according to Tosfot is to know how strict does the designation need to be.
Mhm.
We knew beforehand that designating the space is what defines it as a Muktze Mechamat Chesron case. But how designated does it need to be? The Gemara Daf Mem Hey rejects a few things that have designated spaces. So how do we explain the Gemara in Kuf Kaf Gimel? Say, we had to introduce Chesron Zoreh to say this is a better designation and therefore it's a more strict designation, and therefore that becomes Muktze.
Mhm.
So clearly also the Eli could be under the same Muktze, right? So according to Tosfot, all the Gemarot are talking about designating spaces. And the question is, how strict are you about the space? The ones in Daf Mem Hey are not strict enough, and the ones in Daf Kuf Kaf Gimel, we have to introduce Chesron Zoreh to say, okay, this is how designated needs to be. Anything beyond that is Muktze Mechamat Chesron case. Now I want to read the Gemara Daf Mem Hey. So again, Gemara Daf Mem Hey, 3 ways of reading. I didn't say the third yet. I know. The first way is to say it's all talking about. Let's go back to Tosfot. It's all talking about things that have designated spaces, but they're not designated enough, strictly enough, and that's why it's rejected. That's why in the Kuf Kaf Gimel we need the Chesron Zoreh to tell me that's real designation. That's Tosfot. Pnei Yeshua says the story in Daf Mem Hey is not Kli Shemachtorei Isur. So I want to propose the same parameter to apply to things that are not Kli Shemachtorei Isur, and that was rejected. That's the Pnei Yeshua. The Rambam, I think, reads in a third way and says the Gemara Daf Mem Hey rejects Daf Kuf Kaf Gimel completely. Abai says a bed has more strict designation. The space designation of a bed is more strict than anything you had in Daf Kuf Kaf Gimel, and yet the bed is not a Kli Shemachtorei, is not a Muktze Mechamat Chesron case. So clearly, this whole space designation thing is not relevant.
That's the polar opposite of the Tosfot. In other words, according to Tosfot,
Right.
that is the criteria, and according to the Rambam, maybe it's not.
Right. The Gemara there is exactly rejecting that criteria. Exactly
Wait,
so.
how does the Rambam
But you
have
said-
some that I'd be curious to see how he deals with the Eli and Chesron Zoreh.
So there in the Eli, he does something different. The Chesron Zoreh, he doesn't paskin at all.
You
So-
said
why?
the Rambam brought that you said according to the Rambam, the reason why the Gemara brought that case is to teach us the additional chiddush of makom.
Right, but that's only according to Rav Chinna. It's the Posh.
No,
Why?
you said it was the Rambam.
No. I'm explaining. I didn't say it to the Rav. Sorry,
No, you said.
I wasn't precise
The
enough.
Rambam
So let me
said
try
that's-
again. No, you're right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Allow me to be more precise. The way the Rambam read the Gemara is, Rav Chinina had this chidush that says that space designation turns something into Muktze Chesron case. And there's a chidush, clear, and that's why clearly you have to quote him because it's a chidush. Now, do you know how much of a chidush it is? It's such a chidush that it's wrong. L'halacha. So there's the Gemara and Daf Kuf Kaf Gimel introduced Rav Chinina Varshami the big chidush that maybe designating a space is also Muktze Chesron case, and we can use that and apply that to Eli as well. Right?
It's not the only.
It's not the only. It's so it's a very big chidush. It's such a big chidush that's not even true lahalacha.
Maybe an extension.
Right. We'd want to extend this idea of things you're makbid on to also to have some other litmus test of what is Muktze Chesron case, which would be right. So going to the Rambam is like this: the basic Muktze Chesron case is Muktze Mechamat Chesron case, right? As the Rambam writes it, Kli shemakpid alav shemeifchatu damav. That's Muktze Chesron case. Now, the Rambam wanted to extend this. The Gemara Rav Chinina Varshami proposed maybe if you designate a space, that's also Muktze Chesron case. And say, if that's true, that'll solve my Eli problem with Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. That's all. That's the Gemara in Daf Kuf Kaf Gimel. L'maisa, the Rambam rejects that. My point was not that the Rambam holds out lahalacha. My point was that the Rambam saw that as the chidush. It was Tosfot saw that as the definition. The Rambam sees that as the chidush, and such a chidush that's not even true, right? It's often happens to chidushim, right? It's right. The bigger the chidush, the less of a chance that's actually going to be accepted, right? The Rambam says that's very nice. It just happens to not be true. It's not true. You see, the other Gemaras don't refer to that. And how does the Rambam know it's not true? What is the Rambam basing his rejection on? The Gemara Daf Mem Hey, when Abaye says beds also have designated space, and that never changed them, right? Which means space designation is nothing, right? Tosfos asks the same question and say, well, it must be a scale of this much designation, of that much designation, and then we have to have Sichas Aram Zoreh as just to give me a clarity on the scale. And it gives them a clarity because I don't know what Sichas Aram Zoreh is, but at least they got clarity out of this. The Rambam says, no, that's not what the Gemara is doing. The Gemara is just saying that's not true. It's not true. It's a suggestion. It's a suggestion in one place in the Gemara, but it's not true. A bit complicated.
Wait, so what do you understand about with Lisa C? Mishpat and it doesn't bring the Rambam.
With what?
How does the Rambam understand the halacha of Shavim Shin Kitzev Rav Basar Shasir?
Or the Mishnah about Eli?
Yeah. Or the anything but the Sichas Aram Zoreh. Unless he rejects that.
Saying the Rambam doesn't even bring lahalacha the Gemara itself.
Yeah.
The Mishnah. It's a Mishnah, right?
Mishnah and Bitza, right?
I think so.
The Mishpat does not have a Rambam on it. It brings only the two.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Why is the Rambam? So the Gemara. It's not a Gemara. It's the Gemara. It's not the Mishnah. Sorry, it's the Gemara on the Mishnah. But the Rambam doesn't bring any of this either. Maybe we need to go deeper into Hilchot Yantiv to understand the relationship between the sugyot. Because actually, why would the Rambam? It's Beit Hillel. We don't usually reject Beit Hillel. You can reject Rav Chinna, but you can't reject Beit Hillel. That'd be strange. Yeah, that's a good question. I think I have to look deeper into that. Let's just sum this up because it was a bit complicated. So let's sum this up one last time. The Gemara in Kuf Kaf Gimel introduces the Sichei Zorei to teach us about space designation, and therefore applies it to new cases. The Gemara in Daf Mem Hey says we see the space designation of a bed, for example, does not help us. The Pnei Yeshua says the Gemara in Kuf Kaf Gimel is all talking about Chilim Shachtal Isur. The Gemara in Mem Hey was proposing let's add another. Let's say the designating space could be a parameter unto itself without there being a Chilim Shachtal Isur. And the Gemara goes on and rejects that. And therefore, according to Pnei Yeshua, Chilim Shachtal Isur, that has a designated space, that's the Muktze Chesron case. That's Pnei Yeshua. Tosfot says we see that all the Gemaras are playing with this idea of designating space. So it must be that they're trying to figure out how the scale works. We say bed, not enough. Menorah, not enough. So oh, that's enough. In that case, so is Eli. And then space designation is the whole game. The Rambam rejects the whole space designation idea, presumably based on the Gemara Daf Mem Hey. Right? Since Abaye said, well, we see that beds are not moved. Right? The Rambam rejects the idea that, let's take one step back. The Rambam never thought that never thought there's such a concept that Muktze Chesron Kis depends on Chilim Shachtal Isur. That's something the Rambam, that never occurred to him. It doesn't, just ignores that. It doesn't, it's not a thing. So as the Gemara proposed, the Gemara proposes space designation. We need Rav Chinna bar Shalmia to say that maybe space designation is also a parameter that will turn something into Chesron Kis. No, we see Daf Mem Hey that's rejected. Therefore, he erases the whole Gemara of Kuf Kaf Gimel and ends up with saying the more straightforward definition: Kli shemakpid alav shemay yifchetu damav. That's a Muktze Chesron Kis. Center? Okay. Shkoyach. That's Shkoyach, guys.